Hello, guys, and welcome back to the Animite Tales podcast, the Betarians podcast. It's been such a long time since we last done one of these. Sorry again for the week's delay. We will actually now finally be back with more podcasts from now on. So this week I am joined back with Daddy Mothmaster, aka Alfie, aka Legion.
What's up, nerds?
We have Obscuricom, also known as Alex, or also known as Aspen.
Hello. Hello, weebs.
And finally, back from the time portal, we actually have Sam.
Great Scott!
So before we get
Morty?
into before we get into this week's topic, I actually wanted to say something about last week's one. Yeah. So Sam, you weren't here for space because you were sucked into a time dimensional portal and just spat back out here. So this week we're actually not going to be talking about space. We're actually going to be talking about biological manipulation. So I hope you've got some notes on that.
It's a good thing I don't.
Ah, they took you away from all your things and sent you into this point in future with nothing.
I'm from the far-flung future. We've already done this.
Oh no. How did it go? Did it go well?
Oh, I don't think I want you to know this. Very
Well,
you don't
that
know.
doesn't sound ominous.
That's not ominous at all.
How's my presidency?
Let's just say Legion probably came back and killed you.
Well, that does
It's
sound
been-
like
it's
We
been
always do
stated.
this.
So everything's going according to plan.
Oh yes.
Well, I don't know about you, Alfie, but I consider that an absolute win.
I'm sure he would too.
That's something I haven't heard in a long old while.
So yes, this week we are going to be talking about biological manipulation. That counts for, I guess, organic shapeshifting, similar to Mystique. The ability to heal, like Healing Factor, like Deadpool, Wolverine, or some other heroes. And, of course, the ability to control and manipulate other biological forms of matter. Now, the person who actually chose this subject was none other than Alex. You chose this one a couple of weeks ago.
Oh yeah. I mean, much like telepathy, it's one of my favorite superpowers, and I think quite underrated. Weirdly enough, like I'm actually when doing research of this, I found that there's actually not that many big, superheroes. At least not in the Marvel canon, anyway. There's quite a lot in anime, and which I'm sure we'll talk about. But, like, for instance, Wolverine has a form of biological manipulation, which is bone growth, and people kind of forget that he has this power, and they don't consider it biological manipulation. And I'm not quite sure why that is, because I think it is a really cool power to just have complete control over the flesh and body. And it's just so versatile. Like you said, you can change your appearance, you can heal yourself, you can heal others, you can completely immobilize people. You could just, depending on how strong the power is, you can just make people drop dead just by clicking your fingers if you just make their heart stop.
I think it's...
It
I think it is that thing, though, when people think of... I think we were talking about this either last week or in the week before with time manipulation. People always consider time manipulation, you can just stop time or go backwards and forwards in time. It's like, well, no, I mean, even a form of, like, stopping the time on your own biological form, like, as in, like, you can no longer age ever again, that is a form of time manipulation. It's the exact same thing of, like, it's cut from the same cloth. It's the whole thing of, like, Wolverine's ability to heal and to grow these bones into these claws. Those are still forms of his biological form manipulating itself in different ways. I mean, technically, he's not controlling it, so technically it's an uncontrollable form of a healing ability. But yeah, he can still manipulate his bone claws to go in and outside of his body. And they actually do confirm that he can control them regardless of the usage of his powers, because his form is that way. Because his actual ability to... His mutation is actually the bone claws and the healing factor, but his powers are just the healing factor. He can still let the claws rip out through his the in-betweens of his knuckles, or out the back of his hands. But they actually, because his powers are nullified, he actually can't heal, and so they're just these massive gaping wounds in his arms, and he actually can start bleeding from them. So I mean, it is still technically a form of biological manipulation, because he manipulates the fabric of how his body works. Like, for instance, his bones that are just bones by more normal features tear through his skin, and then he can use them as weapons. So I mean, yeah, that's sort of like my 2 cents on it. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of an interesting subject nonetheless, because I think it's less underrated. I think the term that is actually the less used out of all of them is undersaturated. You're right. There are very
you're
little
right.
usages of it, but I think it's because it's one of the most powerful.
Yeah, and that was my other example. Like, again, it's just my opinion, but there is one prominent Marvel hero that has biological manipulation powers, in particular biokinesis, and he is a good guy, but he often sort of like goes between a good guy, bad guy. When I was actually doing some research of this, I found that a lot of biological manipulators, outside of Wolverine, they tend to be bad guys or straddle the line between good and evil, because they have the power to heal, but also to destroy, and essentially, have this. It's the same principle with telepathy, I think. Like, you're having control over something that you technically shouldn't have control over. Like, it's a taboo subject to invade someone's body and have control over their body, when really everyone should be in control of themselves, and that's taken away from them. Like, you've got Mr. Sinister, you've got Apocalypse, you've got a lesser known villain, anti-hero called Scramble, whose name refers to him scrambling people's bodies, literally,
I mean, that's
in the most
cool. I don't know about you.
devastating and horrible ways. And again, that's what I said. He's not really utilized very much, but that's really cool, but also terrifying. Like, he can just turn you into the creature, the thing, just with tactile contact. That's an incredibly horrifying power. And then
Or a
there's like,
Cronenberg. I just thought of that
oh
one.
yeah,
Yeah.
they turn you into a Cronenberg. Actually, here's something, because I'm sure that everybody will coming up with more examples from anime and popular culture. But one that I found out is, which nobody really tends to mention, is the Zamitzi from Vampire the Masquerade.
I
Like,
mean, we don't, but I'm pretty sure we know a specific artist who, if we got him on this podcast, would definitely talk about them a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't blame him,
I know what you mean.
because he knows that book inside out. And again, if no one knows what we're referencing to, our artist, Coming Soon Entertainment, if you follow him on Twitter, he does some stuff every now and again. He is a big, avid lover of Vampire the Masquerade, and he always tries to get us into games. We don't always have enough time, and it does actually kind of sadden me sometimes, because he really likes it and he knows so much about it. I don't think I personally had him as a DM, but he's quite funny as a player.
I would love to have a DM again when I actually have time. Especially, I've also got a friend who's super into Vampire the Masquerade, and I worry about him sometimes because he loves playing as the Zamisi, and he
What are
used to
they?
do it like, they are a clan of vampires that have this special ability called vicissitude, which is that the art of flesh and bone shaping. And even by vampire standards, they are considered horrible sadists. Like, they consider humanity to be like just a pupa stage of evolution, and it's something that you overcome, and you literally and figuratively shape your own destiny and body. And yeah, you can have some horrific implications of its power. My friend who played as a Misi for quite a few years, his favorite thing to do was turn his enemies into bone statues. Like, just make their bones grow outside of their skin and suffocate them, and just display them in his living room, like a grotesque bunch of statues. Again,
Pretty
I
good
worry
idea.
about that. I worry about this man. But
So
but
I guess the biggest thing that I want to actually quickly move on to then, before we
Oh, yeah.
actually go into the the subject, the examples, and everything is why it was chosen. Now, I actually have an inside look into your previous knowledges, your collective knowledges of powers and understandings of different abilities. Now, beforehand, you weren't a big knower of the ways of biology manipulation. You actually didn't really know too much about it, or at least you didn't show to have that much of a grasp or understanding on it, Alex, beforehand. You actually played as Aspen.
Aspen changed everything, definitely.
Yeah, I think it's that thing of, like, as you said at the beginning of this, I think it was telepathy is one of your favorite powers, and now so is this. It's common ground to, like, a year ago that wouldn't have been true, but now with a deeper understanding and concept as to how powerful it can be, but also how useful in the forms of utility it can be. Because, I mean, Aspen had many times had the ability to be able to eventually become this character actually technically could do more damage than anyone else in the campaign. And at the end of it, they actually had no chance of that. But instead, they had the ability to do literally everything that none of the other parties could, because of biological manipulation. And
I kind of like that. I like that more, to be honest. I find that's more interesting, really. I mean, that was kind of my plan. Like, in the middle, like how I was setting it, it was sort of still kind of evolving the character a little bit, and it's like they were kind of considered a weakling, and they still kind of are, but it's like not about, how much power they have, but what powers they have and what they can actually do that no one else can.
I think the best way to sum it up was actually the concept of, if anyone's ever seen shows with superpowers, like, the Justice League or Teen Titans or even My Hero Academia, it's never about the characters who have insane powerhouse abilities like All Might and All for One or Superman and Darkseid, or even like if people are big fans of Marvel, it's not always about the Hulk. It's about those one characters who can walk up and go, yeah, this one ability, it is regardless of strength, it is regardless of my speed, it is regardless of my capabilities of taking a hit. If I use this, you are going down or you will be useless. And it's that exact thing of like Leech, who has the ability to stop people's powers in X-Men. That was kind of an interesting one, but I think my favourite abilities are like Shigaraki, like Tomura Shigaraki. If he just touches something with all 5 fingers, it just instantly disintegrates. It's regardless of your abilities or powers, you just disintegrate. If it touches you, you're done. And then with Marvel and DC, you have, like, in DC Comics, you actually have the Phantom Zone, like the ability to send someone into a pocket dimension. If they're gone into this pocket dimension, that's it. It's regardless of power. They're just sent into this other dimension. And it's
you say that, but Shao Kahn was able to escape from it in Mortal Kombat versus DC.
I'm pretty sure that he has magic though, and again, exactly. that's again what I'm talking about. And another thing, Superman. Superman is insanely powerful, and everyone says that one of his biggest weaknesses is magic. No, that is actually a misconception. He just doesn't have a resistance to magic. It's the exact same equivalent as when we were talking about in D&D or in Anime Tales. If you have a damage immunity or a damage resistance, it does seem like in a particular thing, if it's a very common damage type, you seem invulnerable or immortal. But then throw a damage type that they don't have a resistance against, and it's suddenly like, oh man, this is their weakness. No, it's just that they don't have a resistance to it. It affects them just like anyone else. And that's exactly the point. Magic bypasses his defenses. No, magic is in a logical form, and as a Kryptonian, his physiological thing is based off of actual biological form. That's exactly the point of, it bypasses defenses because it's literally targeting the creature regardless of powers or abilities, because everything is a living creature in the eyes of mortality. But why this was chosen, and that's what I wanted to say. Sorry, I just needed a drink there.
No, it's fine.
Sweet.
Why this was why this was chosen, Alex. That's why I think that this was chosen. That's my personal opinion, or at least my insight to it.
I mean, that definitely is like, well, I mean, I can't exactly refute it because it is. I was like, I kind of have sort of gained definitely more of an appreciation for it. And yeah, I guess, yeah, without Aspen, it wouldn't be one of my favorite powers alongside telepathy. Telepathy was always like my main one, and plant manipulation, of course. You know, I do like my poison ivies. But I guess it's not just that, it's also like I didn't really consider the story possibilities for it. It would just be like before, like you said, it's undersaturated in that there's only like a few, stories like about it. Whereas while I don't like the character like Elixir from the Marvel universe, I do like that it's opening up possibilities of duality of like healing but also destroying, and how a human being copes with having that power. And it's something that Aspen certainly deals with as well, like having sort of this ability, having the power over life and death. And how I created my my character that's currently displayed in my avatar right now, the evil version of Aspen, Poison Oak, who took the route of like using biological manipulation for power and control rather than for, utility to help people. I just find that kind of fascinating and like maybe more like psychological, aspects of humanity and like how that it's being portrayed. But
shows
you're
a good,
right.
like,
I mean, I wouldn't
360.
have thought about that like if I hadn't have played as Aspen and it hadn't opened up.
Yeah. So I mean, the next part of this, podcast is obviously we usually open this up to is examples. Now I know that we have a load of examples. I know how I have mine. I've already spoken about them. So I'm gonna move it over to Sam. I'm sure you've got a couple in your baggie. I'm sure you do. Of examples of manipulation of biological matter.
Well, I do have a lot of them. Now that you mention that. Well, I've got a couple of characters I'm playing at the moment that do that, but I'll talk about them after I talk about the ones that people do know. So, Greek reference here, Demeter, of course, can control the ability to grow plants, make them grow and make them die off, if she so chooses.
I guess that's more nature manipulation, but fair enough.
It is. I mean, still technically biological because it is biological life forms.
I mean, that is true, although I know someone will have to say this, and I have to say this now. Technically, that would be chlorokinesis or ecokinesis.
I know.
So therefore, it would be more nature and or plant manipulation than biological.
But we were talking about like the full spectrum of being able to control life, weren't we?
Yes, although plant. I mean, no one ever turned vegan because a plant was being harmed.
I mean,
For
you
yourself.
say that, but they have done that in D&D because there's a spell called Talk to Plants, and by God, will you be afraid what they tell you? Of course.
Just
And,
kill me!
Well, that's exactly why I'm only a meat eater, because at least I can't understand. I can't understand the struggle for animals.
And like all Greek, well, most of the Greek gods, they can transform into different animals and different creatures. Like
Yeah.
Zeus becoming an eagle,
By Jove, they
or
can.
a ram, or just about anything to get with someone.
Yep.
Yeah.
Stare and a 1,000-mile stare, just looking off into the distance. Yep.
I mean, just because I didn't mention the gold dust.
What's the
I
gold
did
dust?
once.
Don't ask him.
No, okay.
And, okay.
Don't indulge him like this, come on.
For the Marvel reference, of course, Puppet Master, I think maybe. Would you agree on
yeah,
that?
yeah,
'Cause he has...
Is that more mind control though?
No,
mean,
it's
okay.
physiological. I mean,
Well,
technically it would be
is
more like
physiological.
telekinetic or voodoo, but technically it is still like he's controlling their biological
Yeah.
factors, I guess.
Okay,
He's
I'll give it
he's
that.
making a miniature statue and then controlling people through that. So
I love the term.
Maybe.
Because I mean, they
kinda.
still have their mind, so I'd count it just in for the fact that he is controlling their physical form. But since it is technically a form of some kind of special telekinetic ability, because I'm pretty sure you can do it on beings that aren't biological as well. Like I'm pretty sure he uses it on one of the robots or android characters at some point.
Like effigy animation as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like an effigy control, like, or even like a effigy possession, or some kind of like, like connection to it, like effigy connection, where like you create an effigy that looks similar to another person, it connects to that person, and then they can control them similar to that. But I guess it could technically be biological manipulation if it was specifically and directly only able to work on biological matter. But I'd still technically count it, because I mean, I think there's something that like he can make them injure themselves, but I think if he does something that allows them to injure themselves, he can do that. But I think if the doll gets damaged, they don't get damaged, or am I thinking of a different character?
Oh no! If the doll gets destroyed, he can no longer control them.
So yeah, it wouldn't be biological manipulation then, because if the doll was damaged, then it would biologically damage the person that it was based off then.
Okay.
The connection has to be purely biological rather than telekinetic.
Was unsure there. Just wanted to make sure.
But hey, that's the whole point of these discussions, is like talking about the connections. I don't know why I snapped my fingers at that. That wasn't a cool thing to do. Put it in the cringe bloopers for later.
Get along with each
I
other.
mentioned the two characters I also have now, which do in part have the ability to control their biomass
Go on.
Go
and
for it.
biomass of others, which is the great priestess Macaria, who is pretty much a cleric from D&D in that, because she is quite low level, she has to smack people in the back to heal them. So she has to touch people using like tactilely, and then ability to control their biomass to heal them.
A pat on the back.
Essentially, yeah, because that's what you have to do in D&D. Like you have to smack people on the back. At least that's how I do it. Just right on the wound. Psh,
You do
healed.
it. You do it to the players as well, though, Sam.
I mean, I wish I could. If I met them in real life, I could just smack them on the back.
That's why we've had to put an entire ocean of a distance between us.
Yeah. Or
That was court mandated.
or my newest character called Arlen. He has the abilities to transform into various different people, animals, and inorganic matter, but we're not talking about that at the moment.
Yeah, it's mainly just like the biology aspect, changing your biological appearance and your size, and shaping your body to.
As it also says in one of your perks, you can technically turn into a multitude of creatures at one time, or turn into something all the way down to the DNA, which
could become Mystique.
Yeah.
Who does have that ability?
Which is why exactly, like, it is organic life, and therefore because of that it is a biological thing, as your biological matter turns into another biological matter. But yeah, no, I like both those characters. Personally, my favourite out of the two of them at the moment is Arlen, because he's had more use of them, and we've seen more of his character development undergo two sessions at the moment. But
I will, audience, we were skeptical, but now we
Oh,
are
yes, I was-
Arlen's biggest fans.
I actually said, and I quote, "I hate this character concept. I don't think I'm gonna like it." And Sam has just made another shapeshifter. 1 week later, literally to the day, yesterday, I said, and I quote, "I was skeptical, but I actually really love this character."
That's all thanks to gambling.
I mean, yeah, gambling, I mean, the power and also the personality. It is exactly that. Like, a power can be awesome, but a character can suck. Or a power can suck and a character can be awesome.
Especially with gambling.
This is what I'm talking about, like matching the powers to the personality a bit, because he uses his powers as an extension of his tricksy personality and being like just getting what he wants and just having a ball. He's a lovable rogue down to the very
He is
last
actually the
detail.
rogue class. I just realised he's basically a rogue
absolutely is.
class.
Yeah.
With kind of like, if it was D&D speak, kind of a druid's power.
Yeah, with animals, and was it animal changing? Yeah.
But yes, Alfie, I know that you have a couple, so go on, lay them on us.
Oh, I do. So, if we were to cast our minds, I'm going to take you back in time with me a little bit here mentally. If we were to go back to the grand old year that was 2011, where I can't remember what TV show, TV channel put it up now, but there was a program called Alphas that debuted in this year. I think it ran for like one season.
Oh, I remember that.
Two
Yeah.
seasons, and it was cancelled because apparently, it was ABC that was just uncomfortable with it. Damn you, ABC! But it was actually quite an alright series. I ended up getting into it, but the main villain of that series, as the entire series is about a certain percentage of the population being a titular alpha and having an ability, it's essentially a live action American My Hero Academia, but without the academia. Basically, everyone from this sort of class has a quirk of some kind. And the main villain was a man called Stanton Parrish, and his quirk was biology manipulation. He could manipulate and completely control every single cell of his own body, even when it's in someone else as well. So basically, if he was to like spit on somebody, he could like control the spit to go in them and do certain things, or like he used it primarily so that he was immortal, as he was a holdover from like the American Civil War, and he was basically kind of like controlling things from the shadows for most of the series. Also, unrelated as well, there's a character in it called Cornell Scipio, I think it's pronounced, but he literally was Bakugo. He was a hot-headed ginger who had the ability to ignite this nitroglycerin like sweat that he produced on his palms. He was just essentially Bakugo, and because it came out in 2011 and My Hero Acca came out in 2014, I feel like
some royalties need to be pulled over.
I feel like Horikoshi was definitely watching this very niche American TV show that ran for 2 seasons.
I mean, he does confirm that he did watch a lot and read a lot of Western stuff growing up in comics and shows. So it kind of does scan, because I don't know how old Horikoshi is, the writer of My Hero Academia, but I'm pretty sure that would still track, because that's about like 9 years ago.
Yeah, it really wasn't. Yeah, it only came out. My Hero Acca only came out 3 years after this series debuted and was cancelled. So
Yes.
It's not completely out there. I feel there might be a conspiracy theory out there for a lot of listeners to.
What if he was the original writer?
Oh
He
my God.
destroyed alphas so that My Hero Academia could live.
Are you saying that Alpha had to walk so that My Hero Acca could run?
Yes.
It's just some test audience sort of stuff, and of course. And of course, what episode would be complete if I didn't bring up Warhammer in one say?
All right, everyone, take a drink.
Everyone take a drink.
Woot.
Swig.
Check off your video checklist, because I'm about to bring up a character, a very, very lesser known character, which is very close to my heart, from one of the best books and sort of time periods of Warhammer history, which is the Burning of Prospero, which is the home planet of the Thousand Suns Space Marine chapter. There's a character called Hathor Matt, who they found there were different schools of sort of psychic potential, which is like the magic come mutation sort of mechanic for Warhammer 40k. And each of the different schools specialized in different things, like pyrokinesis, telepathy. And Hathor Matt was the captain who specialized in a form of power called biomancy. And he used it to make himself, as he was a very, very vain character, he used it to make himself look absolutely beautiful, and basically modeled himself after a lot of his heroes that he really looked up to, like the Primarch Fulgrim, and made himself look beautiful with like long flowing like blonde hair. But it also allowed him to do various things like siphon poisons out of other people and neutralize them himself, as well as sort of like increasing his strength, dexterity, or even mutating limbs or his entire body to perform sort of various feats there as well. So biomass manipulation is quite prevalent in a lot of these different properties, and it's a really cool power that you can give a lot of like your Chaos Princes if you ever play Chaos.
I do have one. And I know this will surprise everyone since I only have one. I have many, but I think, to be honest, I think we've heard enough of my examples, but I will just say this one. Bloodwork from the Flash Rebirth comics and the current Flash TV series. Alongside many different villains, they actually have all sorts of different ones that go through, time manipulation, speed manipulation. They are speedsters. They can manipulate time. They can manipulate space. Whatever. Different powers. Even like sort of mimicry types, because one guy can actually turn his entire body into poisonous gas. which by the way was really one of my favorite times that they used that, because it's just ridiculous. Like, this guy can turn into poisonous gas. You can't hurt poisonous gas, but either way. So there's loads of different ones, but Bloodwork was a scientist who's trying to basically find a cure for, I think it's HLH. I think it's a specific blood cancer, I think.
I know that I didn't have a clue who this character was until you mentioned it, and then when I had a look at some of the pictures for sort of like the monstrous form that he takes, it looks so cool.
Yes, he eventually tries to work on a special cure for it, and he does actually create a special blood serum that when he takes it, it seems to control and configure how his powers work, and eventually he starts being able to infect other people with it, and it's like, oh yeah, people's blood no longer age, and all this. It's like, yeah, but you've basically turned them into zombies because they don't have their minds anymore. And he then does the exact same thing with all sorts of other different characters. He starts controlling them, but at some point he does start, just like in the comics, he starts taking blood from loads of people and straight up murdering them. And the blood that he takes, like this special blood that he keeps absorbing into him, he eventually becomes this being of pure like blood. And again, like another elemental mimicry type, except from he's just like pure blood. Like, in certain variations of him, you can't actually cut or kill him in the usual ways. You actually have to nerf or nullify his powers to be able to actually able to do that. But I think in the forms that he's taken, he is just literally a one person that is covered in all of this blood that he can then control, and even control people's blood if he can get his blood into someone else. Which, by the way, if anyone knows anything about blood on any particular medical level, that is really gross. Like, just really disgusting.
He looks really icky, I will say. To use
But-
the technical term, he looks icky.
One of the coolest yet simplistic designs ever. How do we make this character? Easy. Make a character with no skin on, and that's his character design. Awesome. Is that going to be a costume? No, that is what his power has done to him, and it seems to mean that he is actually somewhat more functional than a human with skin on. Does this create any kind of weird messages for people? No, not at all. Just ship it out.
I think like this will move on to my question for all of you that I have, group questions. It seems that like, as well as personality types being paired with biological manipulation, like I think professions like mad scientist pair really well with biological manipulation, and body horror. You know, that
He's
overcomes from
alive.
being a
Yeah,
mad
body horror.
scientist. So I just
Alive.
want to, throw that out there. Like, what do you think about that? Like, is it an overused trope? Is it like just a natural, connection, or are there like other possibilities, for for professions paired with this power?
There are always other possibilities. You know this from my background with coming up with characters to creating the powers and personalities for them. So I know that there are definitely other ones, but
Finger guns at all of you.
I think since I'm always creating them, I think I'm just going to talk about one that is actually quite often used with that, which is I'm going to take this one out of the table, guys. I think we've already seen it enough. The cocky character who believes that they are unkillable, immortal, or just genuinely cannot be harmed. I think we already see that in Deadpool. We already see that in a lot of characters that genuinely have this ability to not die. We see it with Lobo. Lobo has the ability of healing factor to such a ridiculous degree that he genuinely... It's not that he keeps pointing it out that he's immortal, even though he genuinely is, but he does actually say to Superman, like, what is the point in fighting me? You won't win. And Superman's like, I am stronger than you. That's not what I was talking about. And that's exactly my point. Like, Lobo can obviously say, I can't die, you can't kill me, because I'll just come back. But it's just that form of, like, at this point it's more of a fact, and he just can't be bothered to keep telling people there's no point in killing me. He just does his job. And that's what I think. I think that kind of, that concept of, yeah, you can be cocky, or after a while it's just a fact. So those two personalities kind of like bind together in the form of like creating this cocky character, this kind of like, overly self-assured character that like, oh, my powers basically mean that I can't die, so life doesn't really have this problem anymore. I don't have this issue of I don't need to have this fear, but also I don't really need to have any fears because it is just a fact. So I think that's my personal take on the personalities. I'll now pass it on to you two for the rest of this particular question.
Who wants to go first?
I don't mind. Do you want to go first?
I shall go first then. Oh yeah, I completely agree with your point. It is usually a sort of a cocky sort of character trait, but I find that it's a lot more. It can be very well aligned with sort of the more bestial characters who are more sort of like berserker sort of characters. A bit like case in point Wolverine, who sort of like is synonymous with the hyper violence and also the fact that he can regen himself as well. But there are other characters, like there are examples from some places like Tokyo Ghoul. There's also a very not overused trope in a lot of horror writing, but it's quite notable that there are a lot of stories where you get a character who is either completely immortal for whatever reason, or has like nigh on unkillable, like you'll be able to regen pretty much anything. And it's the fact that they can live forever that ends up being their downfall, in the sense that like there could be characters that are like tortured pretty much indefinitely. There's an episode of early Supernatural TV series as well, where they come across a doctor who has the ability to essentially live forever by reaving organs and things from other people, and he can pretty much just like suture whatever into himself. And there's a bit in that where he says like, "There's no point in killing me because I can't die. I've got like 12 hearts, I've got backup organs, and all this other stuff." So he ends up basically getting chopped up and locked in a coffin underground pretty much forever. And it's the fact that he can't sleep, he'll just always remain sort of conscious underground there. So I feel like this it's a power that's really synonymous with a lot of enduring a lot of hardships, but also kind of going a bit mad or like losing a lot of your humanity. Because I feel like mortality itself is a mainstay of the human condition. The fact that like people are quite finite, and the fact that power kind of goes against that as well in a lot of ways.
It just sort of
somebody.
It messes with people's minds as well. Like
Yeah.
like with enemies, it's like they're not supposed to get up. Like they're not. You're supposed to die. Die, damn you, die. Like someone, I forget who said it, but there was a quote once that said like the greatest horror isn't a great powerful monster that comes to get you. It's the monster that gets knocked down but gets back up again later to follow you. And I
Yes, has
think
anyone
that's
played
very
Dead Space
much.
with a test too?
I mean, it's something that you just said that reminds me of something. Is you said the mortality is the main mainstay of like what creates and keeps us sort of human. Mortality is humanity, but that's one of the things that like this creates the god complex. As soon as someone is able to have something that can stave off their mortality, that basically creates that whole thing of I am a god, or I am unkillable, I am immortal, and
Yeah.
it is that exact thing of like that technically in on itself, a being that believes themselves to be higher than they technically kind of are, because still, even if you're a human who can't die, you are still a very tiny speck in the massive universe that you exist in, which is a form of madness if you believe that you are some kind of higher being. Like, yes, you don't have the ability to die, but as you said, coffined, if you can somehow get trapped or placed in somewhere, you do just become mad. Like it is a form of madness already to believe that nothing affects you anymore. And so I think that is actually kind of an important point, is like, yeah, humanity, mortality and humanity are basically one and the same sort of a sort of thing of like what is our humanity is that we are exactly what we are. And I think that's the problem, like with a lot of villains, is that their whole point is, oh, I don't have to think about my humanity. All I have to think about is the powers that I have in the stead of it, the things that like make me what I am now, rather than what I was born to be.
A bit like Vandal Savage from DC. It's
Yes.
like you see you see a massive trope, and also in Alphas as well with Stanton Parish and like loads of other characters from various medias, including like Full Metal Alchemist with Father. Like any character, no matter if they're human or not initially, given that lifespan, eventually develops a very nihilistic or reductionist sort of standpoint. I think it's just purely because of the perspective that they get on life, is that life is so short in comparison to them, so therefore they elevate themselves.
It's also that naivete, though. It is that naivete of believing that because you've lived a longer lifespan than a human, and because you don't have the same capability of dying as humans, it creates that thing of a self-fulfilling prophecy or a self-destructive path where you say like, nothing has any point or meaning anymore because that I know after living 100 years I'm immortal. It's like, well, you don't know that though, because again, as we were talking with time manipulation, unless if you have it, you can't see the future, and even with it, you can't see the perfect future because the future is always changing, and because of that. That's exactly the point of immortality. Like biological manipulation, you can manipulate things and it creates that god complex. But ultimately, as we've said with Santa Parrot, as we've said with Aspen and Evil Aspen, and as we've said with the Greek gods, and as we've also seen with Macaria, there is still a limit to what you have, and because of that, some people want to challenge that. Like for instance, some people will be like wanting to know that this ability of theirs has some level of gap where they cannot access, or even a reduction to the amount of times that they can use it, or even just the fact that there is proof that they are not all powerful, almighty.
I think that's like the main difference between, our Aspen and Evil Aspen, really, because, well, as all the players will know, Aspen has always been aware of their mortality, like just through their sheer bad luck. They've always been like a shade away from death, to the point where like just getting them alive at the end of the campaign was the main goal. Like everything else was gravy. It was just sort of like, oh, please just live, please just live.
You like with the help of a certain time manipulator.
Yeah, it really is.
Various other factors, you've just about managed it.
But yeah,
to be honest, that whole arc took the whole arc in the country of Asconia really took its toll on the players. Psyches and morale. I feel like we've all come away damaged, calcified, but ultimately more wise. And
at some point, I would like to talk about something to do with that. Another podcast, maybe at some time or another time.
Oh, we're going to talk about that.
Villains,
we will get our grievances.
villains in campaigns, or villains in stories, and then we'll talk about villains, or even deifying or vilifying characters, like in general, and talking about what a good villain is. Like for instance, with biological manipulation, everyone, unless if you are a robot or undead or something, almost everything and everyone is biological, and because of that, everyone's like, oh, I don't want to, fight this guy, but we have to, and we're all at that disadvantage. But sorry, Sam, we keep putting you by the wayside.
Yes.
What is your answer to this? The personality traits, or an interesting personality trait to this?
To be honest, I have so many things I was going to say between you speaking. Like if you've ever seen Penny Dreadful, Frankenstein says to the creature, "Don't threaten me with death, threaten me with life," because he realizes that eternal life is worse. Okay, let's see what else. And if you want a really evil, I personally uses biological kinesis. Think of Allied Master Computer from I Have No Mouth and I Must
Yes. Amazing.
It keeps everyone alive and continual torture. And if you get the really bad ending, you become this, a slug. I don't even really know, this slime blob creature with smoke rising from your eyes.
And you truly
you can't eat, you can't breathe. You're just this eternal creature. You're immortal. And I have no mouth and I must scream, of course.
I actually downloaded that.
But there are good. And speaking of immortal people that are good, the Highlander, he's good and he's immortal and he's lived for a long time. It's a Babylon 5 reference. The first one, the first being in the entire universe, or they're a race of first beings, but they existed before death happened.
But that's the trade-off though, because the Highlander and the first beings and stuff are still quite tortured people who are sort of morally grey. you know,
I
and
mean,
in many cases, I mean, they're still the good guys, but they've still got like, you know, internal issues and like problems with social interaction because of this power that they have.
but they're still like, even as we see, like in the first Highlander movie, he still got good at heart. Like he
Oh
saves
yeah.
that little girl from the Nazis,
I mean,
and all around he doesn't go around slashing people. He's not the Kurgan.
it is that thing, isn't it? Like biological manipulation, immortality, whatever you see is that thing. I think the question is really, Sam, and this is actually a
I
question
know, but I was
for Ari specifically. Is
going to mention other professions you could be with biological
well,
manipulation.
we know that, but what we want to know is a personality trait now, which is let's
be
have
any
this.
personality though.
Let's have this.
Like-
Yeah, exactly. So here, let's have this
I was gonna
question
say,
for
like-
you. What would you
Like, if
have
you're go-
with Ari? What would you? Yeah, because we know the amount of references you're going to pull out of your hat,
No,
mate.
I'm not going to pull references out. I was just going to say, like, you could work in like a hospice. You could bring people make people feel better as they go. You could work in the
whimpering.
hospital. You can make
Just,
you
You're
just the
making-
whimpering
like
is
death.
perfect. Like,
Don't
could be
make Sam
deaf.
cry. Don't make
I just
Sam
want
cry.
to speak for God's sake for 5 minutes without
No.
being interrupted.
no, that cannot happen, Sam.
Yeah, I told you it was going to end badly in the future. Yeah.
Oh no, he was right.
The prophecy has become true.
See, guys, we do link it all up in the end.
But yeah, like there's a spectrum of what you could be. You could be literally anything with biological manipulation. You could be insanely insane. You could be evil. You could be good. You could be lawful good. Paladins have healing touch, which is healing people.
I mean,
biological
okay,
manipulation.
here's a question for all of you, and we'll go to Sam first with this question. This is my part of the group questions. When it comes to biological manipulation, we obviously have all sorts of different ways that you can create personalities, and as we've seen with Sam and every one of us who have been speaking so far, we have actually found out that yes, you can have literally anything good or bad with this power, even neutral with this power. You can have literally any profession, because there isn't a moment that goes by that someone wouldn't need helping or healing. Like, oh, I've got a jaw rake. Cool, yeah, I heal that. Oh, I've got this massive wound on my own. Cool, I'll heal that. Or the opposite. Oh, I've got a jaw rake. Cool, I make that worse, and now your teeth are all rotting out your face. Or oh, my hand is missing. Cool, yeah. Also, so is your leg, because I've just stolen it because I kind of want it now. You can do all sorts of things. But here's my question for all of you, and we'll go to Sam first. What power pairs well with biological manipulation, either, and it's up to you, either in a good or evil perspective. And I will come back to mine right at the end of this question. But Sam, what do you think would be paired really well with biological manipulation, to make either a really good or really bad, really good, really bad, evil, good, neutral, whatever kind of character. But how would you pair them off together?
Damn, I really should ask someone else now because I can't think of any.
No, you make this bed.
No, come on,
Yeah,
no.
it's a bit.
Here's your shovel, start digging.
I suppose telepathy, so that you wouldn't be able to know, like, what's in pain, as opposed to saying, "Oh, it's my arm." Like, they actually be able to know, like, okay, it's this specific part of the arm, or for the evil side, you can control them both physically and mentally. Then,
But yeah,
like, you could literally, or you could be like the body swapper then, because then you could, like, just be like in a, like just being like some kind of tube with wires in you, like keeping you alive, and just be like, I will now control you. I will see through your eyes. I will,
Oh, that is actually really cool.
You could be
that's
full
cool.
on evil vampire mode.
Makes me
You,
feel
you
uncomfortable
can
thinking about it.
do like the good version of that though, instead of like the scary, oh my god, he's too powerful sort of version of that power. Whereas you pair it with telepathy and you can heal mental trauma as well as
Oh.
physical trauma. Because that
That's
is one of the weaknesses of well, not really weakness, but like a gap in the power of biological manipulation is that you can heal someone physically, but the psychological trauma will still be there. Although you could like put those two powers together and potentially do cure a lot more ailments.
Actually,
that way.
pairing off with something that Sam you just said is actually the perfect reason as to why telepathy and biological manipulation would be perfect together, especially for biokinesis, like actually the ability to control physical biological matter. you can read a person's mind, and technically you'd be able to know what kind of pain it is. Is it an ache? Is it a sore? Is it just like a shooting pain through the nerves? You know, where is it? Is it a muscular pain? You know, I think that's actually a really perfect comparable pairing, because that would be the perfect doctor.
Or maybe for the mad scientist, the new effigy animation. Because then you could
Yes.
create a Frankenstein's monster.
I had like
Frankenstein, as it's meant to be pronounced.
I did actually. That was actually an idea I had for a villain in the kiln, which we won't be returning to. But I was just thinking that there would be this guy who had biological manipulation and effigy animation, and he'd basically just make meat puppets. You know, just like shape the flesh to be these horrible sort of Cronenberg-esque monsters,
that
and
is
they
cool.
would be yeah. And it's like if you were like in a morgue or something, if you just killed a bunch of people, you know, or just were in a crowd. If you were in a crowd of people, you could just instantly create your own army, you know, just by, you know, killing them, you know, by snapping their neck or whatever, and then just like, you know, from their bodies, just create these horrific monsters. I scare myself sometimes.
Oh, Alec, you and your genocidal thoughts.
I mean, going off on that, actually, though, the ability to control the dead is one of the most terrifying abilities. But the ability to actually control the living is just as scary, because I remember seeing something similar to that with in the Legend of Aang. There's the Bloodbender who can actually manipulate people's blood, and there's a moment where it's like, oh, I'm going to use both of your friends to fight each other, and you have to either use bloodbending to stop them or stop me. Because you're not powerful enough, and she eventually does. She eventually does use the ability of bloodbending to stop. But it's that thing of, imagine if you had effigy animation and you had biological manipulation. You're able to control the biological matter in these people, and then start like creating these dolls as well. And it's like you have an army, and you can control these other people. So it's like there is nothing that you can't control. And a person who would be like, oh, but you can only control a limited amount of things. It's like, yes, but I can make your friends fight you. And now the strategy is, do you kill your friends, knowing that they are not willing in this fight, or do you just try and figure a way around them so that you can fight the opponent? And ultimately, it's still difficult because they have an army alongside them. Because that's the point with powers. You can either use them operating them separately to basically still like hold like control multiple fronts of the battlefield, or you can combine them so that they actually work in one particular like narrow way, but they can pierce much further through the story than others. I think that's kind of an interesting way of looking at it, really, is those two powers actually can control a larger scale amount of different things. Like it's kind of like majoring in multiple subjects.
So anomalies are just nerds.
They are just,
really.
To be honest, you do have to be a bit of a nerd to play as an anomaly, because there's so much admin for them. It's so difficult.
When I first started Aspen, you know, I was like, because I just played a husk before that, and I was like, so you know, got the hang of it. That's fine. And I think I annoyed you quite a bit because I was like, yeah, I got this, and like a day later, I was like, I don't got this. There's so much.
So many powers.
I mean, I personally don't remember that, but then again, I've had a lot of alcohol and sleep between those moments.
Yeah, you've effectively blocked it out, and I don't blame you.
I mean, it's less that like I will point this out. It's less that you annoyed me with your questions. I will have to say that it was more that I would say, Alex, do you need any help with anything? And you'd say, no, I think I got this. And then later on, you'd come to the table, thinking that you had this thing. You'd then say, oh, I do this, and then everyone looking at you like, okay, I don't even have the rule book on me, and I know that's not right. And I
mean I don't have insta-kill powers?
and I loved it, and it was just like, I would just sit there with my hands together against my lips and go, Alex, can I see you in my office, please? You don't have an office, Joe. No, I know, but that's how much disappointment I've been able to create from just this one scenario. No, but no, I was never upset or disappointed, but it would be that moment of like, this makes it difficult because I don't want to have to start retconning things in the middle of a campaign, but we did have to do that when misunderstandings happened. But as I said, I am still blessed with the amount of admin that I've had to do, as well as cursed with it, because
Punishable by death. Is what you're saying.
yeah, it kind of it is the death of my social life. And legitimately, if I make any amount of money that is actually profitable on this project, I do have to take Siobhan out for a nice meal or something, just because all of the nights that I've gone, I have to work on this because of this, that, and the other reason. And at the same time, I also had to do the same for my brother, because he does so much work on this, despite the fact that he has so much going on in his own life, and he's about to go to uni, and he's about to go into basically medical school and everything like that. It's just that thing of he does not have time for this, but he still does stuff because he enjoys it. But for me, it is a job that I have on the side of any other job that I do, and because I can do it at home, what with the lockdown at the moment and everything, it does make things easier. But yeah, when questions aren't asked, again, the thing that we were talking about in a while back with communication, it is so important to understand that these powers are complicated to learn and to understand. Creating a character with even one of these abilities is difficult, but if you don't fully understand them, then it's always best to look for research, or even just watch a show that has a character with that power in it, just to see how they will operate with it, or even just ask your narrator, DM, or ask friends for ideas and inspiration. That's what I would always say, communication for inspiration and ideas, like that. Because I mean, Alex, eventually when you got into the hang of it, you didn't need my help. As a matter of fact, every single person on that table was saying, why don't you just go for a buff? Why don't you just increase damage and be as powerful as us? And you're like, oh, maybe I will. And you never did. And at the end of it, no one said anything, but I did. And I said this, and I said, it's funny how no one is saying about how many buffs you needed to take, Alex, isn't it? Considering that you can now pretty much resurrect them.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm just saying, yeah, it was like a sort of running joke, and it's oh yeah, you all make fun of Aspen until you need to heal.
Yes.
And
it's exactly that point. So yes, it is important to go and get inspiration if you're really struggling, but your own path is the most important. What do you want out of your abilities, and how do you want to make your character's story fly? And in this current situation, it was all abilities, because damage output wasn't important if you could make loads of special abilities.
Absolutely. And I'm really happy with that, actually. I mean, we may revisit Aspen again in future to get that final level that I wanted. That final level. I'm just 50 XP points away from the final level, and I just want it.
Bill and I were talking about the irony of if we actually did do the threat level differently, about 2 months or 3 months before, Aspen would have leveled up, and so would everyone else. But because we changed it, we can't obviously retcon it, so it's
It's great. That's fine. That's fine.
Eyes twitching.
That's fine. Well, to be honest, my final go, I mean, I was a little bit upset. I was like, oh, I was so close. But at the same time, the ultimate goal was to keep Aspen alive. And in that session, Aspen almost died again. And it was only through, having a high roll that I managed to not die and just be badly burnt instead.
I think that's another downside that we don't actually see. The ability of Aspen was that they were the healer, but who healed Aspen? I'm gonna now pass this question over. Yeah, Alfie, what do you think powers would go well? We've already talked about effigy animation. We've already talked about telepathy. But what powers do you think that would go well with biological manipulation?
I would like to go the proper weird route and have telekinesis with biology manipulation, so I could basically make meatball from My Hero Acca and just massage people into meatballs, and as long as my DNA was on them, I could control their DNA at least to some degree, and I'd just have it so that I'd put my arms behind my back and then just disseminate them into little weird meat chunks and start floating them around me.
Well,
Like
I
a
now
meat
I now know
bowl.
what power you're going to go for next.
I like it. That's really, really cool. I feel like that character was one of the most interesting powers, and from what little we saw of him, what like quite an interesting character as well. He's kind of a what if Bakugo had the temperament of Fura King Bradley, whereas Bakugo's like the explosive, angry egotist. This guy's more of a cold, calculating egotist.
Yeah,
He's kind of got like a superiority complex, and I
I
feel like a lot of these characters had really make their own shows like quite easily.
I personally have to go the opposite. I have to play devil's advocate here and actually say I actually think that he's the perfect example of when a power is amazingly, ridiculously powerful, and it's cool, it's awesome, and the character itself is actually really kind of rubbish. Like I'm sorry, I don't like his personality, I don't like his characteristic, because he's like, at first he's like cold calculating, but the second afterwards, like when he loses, they create this whole like joke of like he has no self awareness about his own situation and he judges other people, and I felt like that was really kind of
Yeah, whereas that's the bandstand like judging people's performances, and everyone's like, "But didn't you lose?" And he's like, "Shut up."
yeah, I mean, also he's talking about how bad a hero could or couldn't be based on their power set. I'm sorry, but your power set is literally out of some kind of Cronenberg nightmare. You literally
Yeah.
massage people into these meatballs, and although that they don't have any health concerns afterwards, and it doesn't actually kill or injure them, it is still terrifying. I mean, that guy could be really useful, but it's still terrifying. Also, the question
Yeah.
is, how useful would it be against someone who has an ability where if you touch their skin, you actually get like some kind of like recoil of damage from them, kind of like if Shigaraki's power was on all of his skin rather than just his hands.
I feel like you could overcome that somewhat by sacrificing a couple of like meatball globs. Like if you massaged him and it started necrotizing the meatball globs, and then you just cut off your sort of telekinetic connection to the meatball globs, because then with your biological manipulation, you could just regrow that arm like relatively
Well,
easily.
yeah,
It's
he
like,
couldn't, but yes, if you had those powers, yes, you could.
yeah, he would not be in a good place if that was the case. Like you would have to permanently sacrifice a limb in order to sort of disable Chigaraki. But like, yeah, in the terms of Animite Tales, you could quite easily overcome that, I'd say, with a good bit of strategy.
Yeah.
I would like to play as a character like that, to be honest.
I personally, now this is my one to the end of that question, the question of what two powers would actually be quite good with biological manipulation. Healing factor, obviously. Moving up now. Nigh unkillable or biomass manipulation is ridiculously good. The ability to be able to heal oneself automatically, like Wolverine, but then being able to control other people's powers. And here's what I'm actually going to say about how it can be used and everything. Going back to the spatial, and also going back to the time manipulation, the question that you actually said sort of almost rhetorically, Alex, way back at the beginning, which was, I'm not too sure why, but there are a lot of people that seem to have it who are villains or bad guys or anti-heroes or anti-villains or something like that. The main reason for it is because it's the MacGuffin. It's the power that, oh, how can we have this character long-lasting? Cool, just give him the ability to be able to survive any of the damagingly powerful outputs of all of the heroes and the protagonists. Because if an opponent can just survive to live another day, that immediately becomes a problem. It's a struggle. And that's why I think it's used a lot more often. Like, Wolverine is a big problem, but let's be honest, he is always seen as the anti-hero or the hero. He's never seen as the villain. Deadpool can be seen as the villain, the hero, or the anti-hero at any particular time, whenever he chooses it, sometimes even in the same story. But a character like Lobo, he is straight up like considered to be an anti-villain and a villain. A character who can sometimes do nice things or good things when he wants to, but he is a mercenary, and if he has a job, he will do it. He will complete his job and task, and that's exactly the point of this this kind of ability. The ability to control one's own life force and control others, whether it's a good or a bad character, like evil or good, chaotic or peaceful, doesn't matter. It's just the concept of that as an incredibly powerful combo that it's like, okay, we have to stop him from being able to heal, we have to knock him out. What if the opponent can heal themselves past the point of if they're supposed to be dead or unconscious? Then it makes it so much more difficult to put them down, because when they're awake again, they'll start controlling your biological mass again, and it just becomes that rinse and repeat cycle of just impossibly annoying opponent to beat.
It's like Chansey in Pokemon, just constantly using recover. It's like
yeah,
just nightmare.
just damage sponge with
Yeah.
the ability to heal.
Actually, I did think of another thing now because of the great Captain Jack Harkness from Torchwood.
Oh, of course, I could.
Yes.
Why not time
No.
manipulation and that?
I mean, those two would be
you
good.
Could be anywhere and never die.
I mean, those two would be good, but there is obviously a problem with that. I mean, in Animite Tales, we obviously don't have it that you can do either of those two abilities at the same time.
I know, but they don't know that.
I mean, they do now.
The listeners don't know that. You
They
could
do.
have pretended.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, those two abilities would be ridiculously good. The ability to heal and manipulate time. I think any ability to heal oneself, and any power with that just makes it difficult. I mean, I think that's exactly why any kind of character in Marvel, or any kind of character in My Hero Academia, or any kind of character in almost any situation has an ability to heal, because then it becomes a problem. Like in Dragon Ball Z, that was one of the biggest write-ins, like, oh no, how can we beat Cell? I don't know, considering he can keep healing and regenerating limbs and bringing himself back from like certain parts. What's the next opponent after this? Majin Buu, a literal living source of like, it's basically like a living magical bubblegum, and they blow it to pieces, destroy it, disintegrate it, but it's like, oh, it keeps regenerating every single time. There's one point where they just burn every part of it, but don't realise that the cloud that they're making of the gas is actually then reforming back into the original form. Like, he even explodes the planet, and then comes back from the bits that are left up off the planet. Like,
Yikes.
I mean, eventually they do figure a way to be able to completely disintegrate him, because then they have to completely 100% destroy every part of his body all at once. But then it turns out that his power is reincarnated into another kid in like some other country. I think it's like a village somewhere. But I just want to point out that it is just that the most overly used power, and it is just the MacGuffin to make the fights drag on longer.
I feel like that can be the case with like a lot of these kinds of characters, though. Like with you have to really be either a good writer or have a real clear-cut goal with defined limitations and rules for the power. Otherwise, you'll end up with it kind of being how a lot of writers tend to write Superman, where it's like you can't really write yourself out of a corner once you put yourself in the corner of, not only is he basically invincible, he can also constantly regenerate everything. He's immune or at least resistant highly to like everything. It's like once you make a character that sort of unkillable, unstoppable, or that powerful, you can really write yourself into a corner and make it less and less interesting. I feel like with that you have to really make a well-defined goal. So maybe have it like in the TV show Aijin from Netflix, the anime show. There's the whole point of the show is the fact that these people who are Aijin, which is like a small percentage of population, they can't die. But it's not just that they can't die; it's that they reconstitute to the largest portion of the body. So there's actually a bit in the first series where the main villain, slight spoilers for anybody who wants to watch the series. There's a bit in the first series where the main villain basically has this guy held captive, and that guy up until this point has gone from a point of view of just, you can kill me, you can stab me, you can do whatever, I'll just keep coming back, so you have nothing to threaten me with. And this guy is also an Asian and says, well, you do realize that, yeah, you can't die, but your body will reconstitute to the largest point that's still kind of intact. So what if we just cut your head off? Do you think that your body will regrow a new head? Would that head even be you? How would it feel to see yourself as your head has been cut off, but is slowly disintegrating, watching your own body regrow a head of a completely another person that looks like you? And there's that whole sort of like weird, they get around it in a load of weird and cool ways. And then at the end of like, I think it's the second season or so, like that ends up basically happening to the main villain, and they leave it on that cliffhanger of like, wait, is the main villain even the same person now? Because he kind of acts a bit differently and seems to have some kind of like amnesia and kind of like losing a lot of his personality. It's like, is that a way you can kind of end a character, is by getting them to kind of like regrow themselves out of existence?
It's the same
Really-
thing as the Wolverine thing, isn't it? Like when they use the adamantium bullets and it removes his memories, but then my favorite quote ever, as I was watching a video about it, and someone said at the end of Logan. Spoilers for anyone who watched Logan. It is one of the best films of all of.
Everyone should watch it.
It's so good.
Everyone's watched it.
Everyone's
Been
watched
living
it.
on- If you've been living on the moon, like, don't listen to this part of the podcast.
Don't listen to this. Just censor it for the next minute because I'm just going to say this one thing. Here we go. Logan at the end of it has to fight a variant of himself. X-24, dumbest thing about that movie, but I will not have anyone slander it because it is actually a brilliant masterpiece, except from that one bit. But obviously, it's a flawed masterpiece. Is that the moment where someone then shoots? I think it's Laura shoots X-24 in the head with an adamantium bullet. There's a video of someone. I believe it's called Pitch Meeting by Ryan George. This guy on YouTube. Honestly, Pitch Meeting is funny. And it's brilliant, and the way that they talk about it. And he goes, when he shoots, and she shoots him in the head with an adamantium bullet, and he goes, so he's going to forget who he is and everything, and he's going to have amnesia? What? No, why? Well, it's just because it happens in X-Men Origins Wolverine. And then he just goes, yeah, stuff that movie. We're not going to talk about that movie. We're not going to think about that movie, other than the fact that we have an adamantium bullet, and that's actually how we killed this version of him. And it's like, and that's it. We never talk about that ever again. And that's the problem. Like, I think when you have inconsistencies, you have those problems. But we're now going to go. Speaking of consistency, we're going to talk about one thing, which is, can it be? Is it in? And does it work in Animite Tales? Biological manipulation.
I think, heck yeah.
Yes.
Is all I'll say to that.
Yes.
And it doesn't even have to be, considering most of the time we've just been talking about immortality. As we discussed earlier, it can be like turning into things, like Beast Boy.
Yeah, that's a form of
Doesn't
biological
necessarily have to be
manipulation.
just immortal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Or you know, you don't have to. You can't just be the healer man without the ability to be immortal.
Yeah, I think
Just in case.
the way that Sam actually puts it is actually the perfect amount of it. It doesn't have to be the most powerful. I mean, look at Aspen. Aspen went for all abilities, but their damage output was a D8 in the game, forever a D8 in the game. But that didn't make Aspen unusable. As a matter of fact, them not having any damage output past a D8 made them able to do all of these incredible things. They could regenerate limbs, they could regrow organs, they could heal people to the point of which they've removed all poisons or ailments. They could worsen poisons, ailments, and injuries on other people. And by the end of it, they could actually control biological matter within a 10-meter radius of them, like as if they were telekinetic, and use any of their abilities on said things. Now, those are only a few of the abilities that Aspen had. A few of them. Aspen had many others, and that was just on one of their powers. They also had ecokinesis, aka nature. But So I personally like how it works in it. I wouldn't want to change it because we do have both healing factor and biological manipulation as two separate powers. Because one is more on the outsource and you actually have to activate it. The other one is more of a passive ability and it only works on the user. Alfie, I don't think you've ever used either of those two abilities. But on the outside looking in, what are the things that you think do you think that it needs to be changed, or do you think that it works the way that it is, or if there were something that had to be changed about it, what would you try and change or add to it?
I to be honest, I haven't really used them, as you say, so I can't speak from experience. But I mean, I like the abilities of control, and I like that sort of like you don't have to be necessarily within tactile contact to sort of like manipulate biological matter. I feel personally, although there is the level where you can kind of choose the necrotizing sort of moveset, essentially. You know what I mean? Like you start sort of controlling rotting flesh and sort of like
Yes.
decaying matter. The only thing I would probably do is I would flesh that out a lot more if I was to make a character that wanted to use that. I feel like if you want to
Flesh.
exactly,
Sorry.
no
Go
pun
on.
intended, but I would flesh it out more a little bit, and I feel like you could probably do that by using like either a unique attribute where remember with the character that I made with structure, but he wanted to be a doctor, so I made it so that he started with a unique attribute being that he started with only biological structure manipulation rather
Yes.
than starting structure standard. I would probably, if I was to do like a necromancer style control character, I would probably do it so I would probably ask the narrator, i.e., you, most likely to have it so that my character starts with only the necrotizing abilities and then level up from there. So from the get go, I can start as a low level necromancer and kind of like up my power level that way. I feel like a lot of these sort of things with sort of like the freedom of powers can easily be overcome though through a mixture of either doing unique attributes, SPMAs, or if you just talk to your lovely narrator, as I'm sure they all will be lovely and very accommodating depending on what the setting is. As long as it makes sense to the story, they could probably easily like just say, "Oh yeah, by the way, I want this ability, but I want it to only work with rotting or decaying matter," which is kind of its own limitation in of itself. Is
Yeah.
that you need decaying matter? I feel like yeah, to be honest, like biomass manipulation with that in mind, having that kind of character in mind, that would pair ridiculously well with decay or with absorption regeneration.
Oh heck yeah.
Because you could literally be a necromancer that has like the red right hand from like Skullduggery Pleasant, where you basically just have like a hand where you like touch someone and it can pretty much just instantly kill them. So you just tap someone on the shoulder and they just kind of stop for a moment and then just instantly become a zombie under your control. Or if you have absorption regeneration, where you basically become like greed, no, not greed, gluttony from Full Metal Alchemist, where you basically just open up this giant like void in you that sucks in all this biological matter and then you reconstitute it into whatever form you want as long as it's dead. I think both of those can make like really interesting anomalies.
I think it's
You
pretty
could
cool.
get like the turn undead, pretty much. Like every time you fight undead, just like bam, go away.
Yeah, literally.
Yes, absolutely. With the
just-
necrotic ability, you could just control, because the way that it's worked under the ability, the mutation is called necrosis. The user becomes a necrokinetic, having the ability to control any amount of necrotized or decaying and or dead flesh within a particular radius, 10 meters plus a 10-meter radius increase every time that they take a buff of this power. The user's abilities, whenever they can now heal or use their abilities, can now will now turn things into necrotic flesh or necrotic organs. However, the user can turn necrotized flesh back into normal flesh, but they cannot create perfect flesh. They can only create necrotized flesh. They then need to undo the necrotization. So basically, almost magically unnecrotize something to be able to turn it back into biological form. So the original standard of it is that you basically use decay damage or necrotic damage on a particular thing to like, so say for instance like I've got a bleeding wound. They go, yeah, don't worry, and they entirely necrotize it and it stops the bleeding, but now they've got like rot all over their body, and they go, yeah, don't worry, roll their powers again, unnecrotizes it, and now they've got like the wound is gone. So it takes a 2-stage. So it does mean that it's a little bit more difficult. But as it states, the user can control anything that is necrotic within their range, which means zombies, undead, or even people with decaying parts on their body, the user can control it. So yes, you could control the dead, and you could just turn the undead. So as Sam was going on there, you don't necessarily have to do it to create control or harm. But as Alfie was saying, you most certainly can.
Oh yeah.
We're forgetting one aspect that we've kind of neglected, actually. The ability to like boost yourself biologically. Forgot about bio boost. You know, one of our favorite powers, and of course the favorite SPMA that Joe has ever come up with for Aspen. Bio boy.
Yes, I do like that ability. I mean, that was a strenuous form based on the idea of bio boosting. Although before going into anything under Aspen, I actually wanted to talk to Sam about this actually, because
Ah.
Sam, you've just started this, but you do have a shapeshifter, and you have done a couple of shapeshifting characters before. But I want to hear from
Yes,
you.
'cause
How do you feel on any biological formulation powers where like you can
well,
manipulate it or turn into it?
I like the ability to turn into things. I think it's very well, like Beast Boy, but also it's very kind of fun because, well, mostly because if has anyone here seen the Ox Ventures group
No.
from outside Xbox and outside Xbox?
Yes, no, I have. I didn't. I couldn't remember their names that way. I always remember them as the outside Xbox. But yes.
Well, they have a druid character called Merylwyn, and her, well, she's a druid, but one of her gimmicks is that she's sometimes cat, sometimes bear, and sometimes squid. And kind of because of that, I thought, you know what, it'd be kind of funny if I played a character that, used like the cute eyes of a cat, and then like in a moment's notice turn into a giant horrifying spider or bear. Like, because I actually do have an SPMA called Cute Eyes, like Spider Eyes, I think was the other one.
Yes.
Where I can roll to use my ability to charm people or intimidate people, depending on what creature I am.
I do love that. I do love that ability.
And considering we can't talk about his other ability yet, because and Billy, who is another character.
Another favorite of mine. I do
Yeah,
like
another-
Billy. Such a little
Billy.
scamp.
Yes. Because he's got a completely different ability, but somewhat the same as my character now. But, because then because as Joe said earlier, you could, like, make copies of yourself. Like, diminishing copies. So you can make, like, a perfect clone of yourself, and then you can make 4 clones of yourself, or 4 creatures of yourself.
Can you make
They're
a rock and
smaller.
roll?
And then, like, 8 clones of yourself, but they're, like, a quarter of the height. So
Make,
you
like,
could just
rock
have like an
and roll
army of
yourself.
like 8 of you, just like the Lollipop Guild. We
I
are
can't
the
wait.
Lollipop Guild. The Lollipop Guild. Or like an army of rats.
I was thinking that actually. That would be,
Yeah,
truly
yeah,
terrifying that you just explode into rats and start swarming people, from all
Yes.
different directions.
I mean, another one that I think that would have been perfect would actually have been like if you had the ability of absorption and regeneration, as we were talking about. Technically, another ability of some kind of biomass manipulation, draining one's own abilities to control another's, or being able to take life force or blood from another and being able to increase your own health, your own powers, whatever. But having that ability plus the shapeshifting ability, you can just turn into an army of bats, and then whenever you reform, you can then absorb people's health and regenerate. You could literally be a vampire using this system.
I mean, next character, Alucard the Vampire.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Oh, and also because of like the ability that Joe also said, the ability to become anyone to the DNA, I've now become the perfect thief.
Yes,
I mean,
you have.
can
Yeah.
become the perfect thief. Because I can just walk into a place and be like, yes, I'm the boss. Blah, 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 blah. Yes, I will take the money now. Blah, 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 blah.
I need to go get it counted. Wait a minute. The boss doesn't count things. It's like, turns out, I learned. Extra deceit roll. Oh, no, yep, sure.
I do have
Yeah.
charisma up the wazoo.
Yes, you do. You have such a high charisma for that character.
Just
I
be
love
like,
that.
just have to flash the eyes and bam, everyone's like,
It is the boss.
Oh my god.
so pretty.
So yes, I guess we come to the final part of this. We have gone over a little bit, but I think we've had a lot of subject to cover here. Alex, your particular opinion on does it or how it does or whether or not it does or not work with Animite Tales. You've used Aspen, but are there any particular things that you wanted to talk about in the terms of how it works in Animite Tales in general as a tabletop RPG?
Well, I'm not sure because, we talk about MacGuffins and stuff. Like, we made a little, running joke of Aspen fix, to get out of like any situation. But then again, that was actually dealt with quite well because there are limitations to those powers, and it just sort of opened up different story arcs and stuff. So I'm not sort of like, so if I do lose a limb or like some internal organs, regrowing them, yeah, that is a huge benefit. But that's not that's not going to get me out of trouble all the time. Like, especially if I take a lot of damage in in one hit, or someone just or like another character we know just evaporating into viscera by diving out of a skyscraper.
Ah,
You know,
yes.
I can't. There's just some things that Aspen cannot fix. So I think that it is
Too
balanced
soon.
pretty well. I think it is balanced pretty well
Yeah.
right now, and I think, and yeah, it's really fun to play. To be honest, I think that oh, I want to play Aspen again. But I want to play another. I want to play like another biological manipulator. That's how much I like how it works in this RPG.
It's a
Oh, it's
really
great.
good healing ability that isn't just for oneself nor just for one's party, because they
Exactly.
can work either way. But they also don't have that thing of, they can just always do it. Because I mean, like, it literally states they have to touch them with their hands until they get biokinesis, and then they can just use it any way, shape, or form, because it's a literal kinetic ability, kind of similar to telekinesis or telepathy. As long as they're within that vicinity and not being nullified, they can actually use it, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's a shame that Aspen and the others didn't get to play any longer in that campaign, because I think that would have been a great way to have seen all of the new effects and abilities that Aspen had. We can always go back. At some point we will, but until then, we'll be with the other group for a while. But I do
Let them be happy for now, I think.
yeah, just for the time. But I think my favourite part about all of this, and this is the note to end it on, really, is my favourite part of using biological manipulation powers. And even if, to reference an old character, the first ever time that we ever played this with an alpha testing group, the first ever players at university who tested this game with me, one of them created a character called Paul, and he had healing factor, and he was MVP. He would walk in, fight any enemies, and it's that moment of like, we can do damage to him and all this thought, and he had the most health because he rolled ridiculously good in front of all of us, and I still jammy as all can be jammy. But he got this insane amount of health, and he was just literally the living wall, basically. Any time that anyone hit him, took him down to a specific amount of health, he would just heal, and he would always get the luckiest rolls at the right moments. But then whenever it was out of combat, he would try and roll his powers to heal, and he would always get the smallest amount of health back. So, yes, I think healing abilities are very useful, because everyone needs healing. Especially in this time. The world is broken, but maybe Aspen one day can fix.
Aspen fix!
Aspen fix.
Aspen cannot fix!
See, there is an important lesson here
Aspen's
today
sad.
And what's that, Sam?
about how even someone as great as Aspen can't fix everything.
Yeah.
That's true. I mean, you said this to me once. That was kind of a good character thing, when I was just kind of freaking out about the situation. It's like, what's going on? No, I can't fix this. And you said something like, sometimes when it heals, it leaves a scar, and I think that's kind of a beautiful thing for my character. It's like, yeah,
You said that.
Yeah, but Joe said that, I think.
Oh.
I said
Who
that
said-
because I said sometimes when you heal, it leaves a scar, whether or not it's perfect, and you'll never see the scar. The scar isn't just physical; it is a manifestation of one's own knowledge of they got hurt in the first place. You have to give things time to heal, and because the Aspen can heal so quickly, you kind of create that barrier of ignorance that, it never happened in the first place, because I can just make it as if it never happened in the first place. But that's exactly the problem. You need to give it time to heal, and that's why I guess we'll leave this.
There
on.
is one thing I do want to say,
on.
since we're ending this, right? This week, believe it or not, is Non-Binary Awareness Week, and Aspen is non-binary, and now
Yes.
you are aware.
Yes, there we go. Yes, yes. So, and by the way, it wasn't by a boy; it was by a boy.
Whee!
Completely
Yeah.
different, and
Different.
it's completely
Whee!
neutral. And if anyone wants to tag anything on that, and go, oh, but it sounds like boy. Well, I mean, that's
No,
your
shut
stuff,
up.
man. That's your
Shut up.
stuff.
I'm non-binary, and what I say goes. It's spelled B-O-I. It's
Exactly.
I am the bio boy. I am the one who wins.
I am the wonder. I love how it just immediately went from like this big metaphorical thing of like sometimes you just need to heal, and now we're just going, no, we'll just jump into this. But yes, that's a very important note. Is that like sometimes things don't heal, but remember, sometimes it takes time. And now that we're onto this point, yes, Aspen is probably one of my favorite characters of all time, regardless of their powers, regardless of their personality, and regardless of what sexuality or gender they were. It was because that it was an amalgam of everything that made up Aspen, from backstory to end game content. They struggled, they had their powers, and although Aspen is insanely powerful, there were some things that it was about their character, their journey, and it was the same with Legion, their journey. Zinzarina was on the final episode, and there was still just the fact of everyone else's journeys was sort of mingling with her own, and I think that's exactly the thing of it. It finally the session finally ends when everyone has sort of reached their peak moment and finally got to the end of their arc, and I think Aspen's end arc was when everyone's leaving, and Aspen's like sometimes things just need to be healed in different ways, and I think that's the most perfect point to end on with everything. Is like we've talked about immortality, we've talked about shapeshifting, we've talked about technically biokinesis, but the one thing that I will just say is we have to give things time to heal. Things don't always get fixed instantly, and even if they do, that doesn't mean that it is perfect, and that's the point. Because as I said before, I'm probably very drunk or very tired at the time when I said this, but as once a very very disillusioned man once said, sometimes you can heal, but the scars are still there. And that is the end of this podcast. Thank you for everyone who was listening to us babble, mostly me.
Yes.
And thank you for coming back from the far future, Sam. We couldn't stop the disaster, I'm afraid. It had to happen.
That gets far worse, trust me.
Oh no.
That's why I think he came back.
But here's the question then, Sam. What will be our next topic for the podcast?
I mean, do you just want to know? Do you just want to know the future?
I mean, what do we pick? Who picks it, Sam?
I mean, I think it's me.
Oh.
Or am I lying?
Oh no.
Who knows?
He's going to be holding.
Destiny meant to happen?
He's going to be holding this
Or is
time
the
thing
future
over our heads
changeable?
forever now. But I guess we'll find out when we see you in the future.